Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to this fourth PAVE Virtual Panel. I'm very pleased to be joined today by a real fantastic group of panelists. It's safe to say that we have a spectacular depth of insurance knowledge, as well as quite a lot of autonomous tech knowledge on this panel here today. I'm pleased to be joined by three representatives of PAVE Europe member organizations. Margherita Atzei is product and partnership manager for P&C solutions at Swiss Re, one of the founding organizations and a board member of PAVE Europe. Jeroen Bartelse is a senior business innovation manager at Achmea. He is also a scout at Achmea Innovation Fund, and Achmea is also one of the founding members of PAVE Europe. And finally, we're joined on this virtual panel here today by Rebecca Marsden, VP of Risk and Insurance at Oxbotica, who develops hardware and domain-agnostic autonomous vehicle software with numerous deployments, including with Wenco in mining, ZF for shuttles, and Ocado for last-mile deliveries. Investors in Oxbotica include a who's who, really, from Tencent to BP, ZF, and yet another insurer, IOE, Nissan, Doha Insurance Company. So as you can see, this panel is stocked full of insurance knowledge. My name is Lukas Neckermann. I'm the initiator of PAVE Europe and also a board observer. I'm also an author of several books that cover autonomous mobility. And yes, I too am an alumni anyway of the insurance industry, having spent over 11 years within the Allianz Group in various capacities. So we have a reinsurer, a primary insurer, and an autonomous software developer on this panel. So we cover really multiple parts of the puzzle. And we also come at this topic with quite a lot of passion. Jeroen, let me start with you. You have quite a few followers on Twitter. You've been listed among the 100 thought leaders in technology to follow. And you've been a proponent of autonomous tech for a very long time. Tell me, what prompts your interest and your passion for autonomous?
Well, first of all, as an insurer, we see that our business model, the easy part is that our business model is changing. Now, if you look at the current world, we make products for people that buy cars. The moment they are fully autonomous and they are in sync with your agenda, most probably fewer people will buy cars because they make use of a service. So that means that our traditional business models will be ending. But apart from that, you will see lots and lots of other changes as a result. The guys from Intel spoke about the passenger economy. So the way the transportation is going to change, you can take the hairdresser car to your work. So you can spend that time, since it is autonomous. And if those things occur, then we have completely new risks that we don't know yet today. So it's really fascinating. So it's going to change a lot, and as a result, cities can be different. Probably the cars themselves will be different because they can be designed just to move one person to a location it needs to be, rather than it needs to be designed for the winter sport holiday, something like that. So it will change a lot, and and also as innovation manager, we find those things that change significantly very, very interesting.
Fantastic. Thank you. Moving over to Rebecca, you have a very long history in the financial services and insurance space. You've spent time at Willis, at Atzei, and most recently at the Lloyd's Syndicate Apollo. How does someone like you land at Oxbotica, a UK leader in autonomous software?
It's a great question, and I'm very pleased that they have let me land here. I have been on a journey, really, as you say, Lukas, through financial services. Started my career completely unaware of the existence of both the insurance and the autonomous vehicle space, to be honest. But moved through, always curious, always devouring, literature and news on new and evolving tech. found myself in the insurance industry, first as a broker, as you say, and then as an underwriter, latterly having the enormous privilege to work within the Apollo iBot team, who are a Lloyd's of London syndicate specialised in emerging mobility, usage-based insurance for the digital economy, which is where I had the opportunity to really immerse myself in autonomous vehicle technology, all of the trends emerging from this fascinating and really exciting space. And I was lucky enough to work very closely with the Oxbotica team on the first fully autonomous driver out journey on European roads last spring, co-creating a bespoke insurance solution, specifically addressing the unique risks associated with a vehicle designed with neither a driver's seat nor a steering wheel. And really, it was a partnership that kind of just stemmed from that. And I had the opportunity to join the team earlier this year. I've joined in a new role, leading risk and insurance at Oxbotica, insurance strategy, and also product innovation, to really help propel both Oxbotica and also, I hope, our peers through to commercialization, so that we can get this transformative technology out to the world and to all of our consumers.
Well, it's very, very clear that the role is tailor-made for you, and you are tailor-made for that role as well. It's great to have you on this panel. Margherita, you have been in the auto industry prior to your role at Swiss Re or at GM Financial, and then joined Swiss Re. And I've seen that you've published quite a few papers, including in the Harvard Business Review. But it's very, very clear to all of us who worked with you as well as part of PAVE Europe that you're very passionate about autonomous vehicles. So tell me, what sparks your passion for our subject?
Yes, thanks, Lukas. And first of all, hi, everyone. Thank you for the intro, and thanks a lot for the invitation as well. I think it's a pleasure really to be here and discuss a topic that I'm really fascinated about with this group. I'd say that what fascinates me the most about autonomous vehicle is really seeing what this technology is capable of doing. I've been in San Francisco for the past few days, and I have been riding around in fully autonomous vehicles around the city, and really seeing what these companies can create is truly amazing. It's something that goes beyond what I imagined possible. And AVs is really one of the most concrete application of artificial intelligence that we see. And it has the potential to revolutionize the way we live our lives, the way we move within city and between cities, but also perhaps also the way cities will be built in the future to welcome this new technology. And something as well that is really motivational and inspiring for me is also the significant improvement in safety that could come from the deployment and adoption of this new technology.
I could not agree with you more, and really 100% on each of those things, the quality of life improvements that we can look forward to in cities as we progress towards more and more highly automated and fully autonomous vehicles, and of course the safety, as certainly in the US, the US has actually hit a high point in vehicle fatalities in the past year, which is absolutely the wrong direction, as we know. And you would think, actually, with ADAS, driver assistance systems, being this interim step towards fully automated vehicles, that we would have seen some improvement at least in the US. We haven't. Now, Swiss Re has been involved in evaluating ADAS systems and has developed an ADAS risk score. So, Margherita, please tell me about this, because we do need to talk about this step as an interim step, perhaps in preparation for a fully autonomous future.
Yeah. Yes, so the Swiss Re ADAS risk score essentially translates engineering knowledge into something that insurers can use to better understand and segment the risk. And through the ADAS risk score, insurers are able to distinguish between the performance of systems based on their ability to prevent and mitigate accidents, but also are then able to reflect these differences in their pricing and in their underwriting. But I think it's very important to clarify that when we talk about level 4 autonomous vehicle, we talk about a completely different technology, but also about completely different business models. The driver is out of the equation, so we don't really have a lot of historical data to be able to perform the usual insurance risk assessment that is able to inform us about the performance of the technology. So there are really some strong differences there that I think it's very important to highlight. ADAS and level 4 are two different type of technologies that can coexist and that can be themselves very effective at preventing and mitigate accidents, but they should be treated very differently, right? But I think the high-level exercise that the Swiss Re is trying to do is really the same, which is to bridge the gap between the AV providers or the car manufacturers and the insurance industry. And this is exactly the same mission that we have for autonomous vehicles.
Will the data that you've gathered so far even be usable, really, for the next step as we head to L4 vehicles?
So I would say that the data and the modeling we have developed for the ADAS risk score will definitely be useful because it will help us have a baseline against which assessing the safety of autonomous vehicles. Because ultimately what we want is for autonomous vehicles to be safer than human, not just of human-driven vehicles, but then human-driven vehicles that are equipped with the best ADAS systems. And ADAS systems are also getting increasingly more sophisticated in preventing and mitigating accidents, and we want to take these into account when we assess the safety of autonomous vehicle.
Super. Thank you. Jeroen, what is Achmea doing in the world of autonomous technology, and how will it prepare your company for a fully driverless future?
Well, we are seeking for objects that we can insure. So at this moment, there's no autonomous vehicles driving around in the Netherlands. There were a few, but that has been stopped. So it's difficult to gather data. But it's also the transition from level 2, which is like the normal ADAS systems, to 3. 4 and 5 are easy because then it's always the car's fault, more or less. And then we have a shift from driver liability to the product liability, because it's always the fault of the car, and that's a completely new product that doesn't yet exist. But if you go and look at level 3. Then sometimes the car drives, and sometimes it's the person. Then of course what happens in case of an accident is that they start blaming each other. That the driver said, "Hey, but the car was driving in autonomous mode," and the car said, "Well, look at our data. It was not our fault. And can you get the data? And how can you prove who's right or who's wrong?" And it's becoming more interesting then that most probably if the car says they will handle the liability, they will also have the insurance for the liability. So then suddenly, as a driver, you have to the insured car says something else than the insured driver. So, and if it's two parties that arrange the insurance, it is becoming more complex rather than easier. So that is what we see, and we find this an interesting development. Where we seek how can we land there, and what can we do to get ahead. But apart from that, level 4 and 5 are way more interesting, of course.
More
at the same
interesting.
time, way easier, and it will mean that we will have fewer clients. But most probably, it's just fleets that are being operated rather than individuals dealing car insurance. So that's a whole shift. So rather than stating, can you insure one car? It is, can you insure all our cars?
I recall when I think it was Volvo and Daimler each said that they would take full liability for any accidents that their future autonomous vehicles would be involved in. This was a few years back. I thought that was fairly bold, and it seemed like a strong promise that could not have been made without a strong reinsurer behind them. Margherita, I imagine someone like the OEMs who make such a commitment, which effectively will then be a product liability commitment, would have spoken to a reinsurer?
Yeah, I think it's a bold statement, indeed. I think I think perhaps the statements you refer to talk about level 3 technology, which is when the driver can still kind of take control of the vehicle. And in this case, the liability can lie with the manufacturer if at the time of the accident, the system was in control of the vehicle. And not the driver, which can be difficult to determine without having access to in-vehicle data, which then opens a whole different topic also for insurance companies on data sharing. But to your last point, having strong reinsurance companies to cover for product liability gives protection, I think, to these companies, and also in a way freedom to these companies to put their products and systems on the road. And I very much like this view because he highlights the role of insurance companies more as enablers and facilitators of new technology rather than blockers.
Rebecca, in this world that we're painting with fully autonomous vehicles enabled by Oxbotica, of course, what is the role of the primary insurer, the reinsurer from your point of view, and perhaps also the role of the broker, given your experience in broking?
Yeah, of course. And I think kind of to pin down a really key takeaway, I think, from all of the conversations that we have in this space when we're in the context of insurance really is mission critical to bringing this transformative technology to market. It is an enabler. It's a phenomenal opportunity for us within the insurance space to be part of something that is the likes of which, from a technological evolution perspective, we haven't seen since perhaps the Industrial Revolution, and then again maybe the advent of the internet. Insurance has a role to play here to bring this to market, and what a true privilege it is for us to all be part of this in the early days. What does this look like from the multiple parties involved? Not just in the on the industry side, but also on the insurance side. I think the way we look at it is very much that we're all part of the autonomous vehicle ecosystem. It obviously goes to the heart of what PAVE is all about. We all exist within this ecosystem as peers, and that includes people operating in the autonomous vehicle space who might in a traditional sense be seen as competitors. We're all responsible for bringing this technology forward, for gaining public acceptance, taking our end consumers on a journey so that once the technology is deployed, people know that in the event of an incident, they're appropriately covered. The companies involved have appropriate fit for purpose insurance that will respond, and the technology itself can be trusted at point of sale. It's all, everything's done. People can trust the product that they're engaging with. The underwriters, the primary insurers, the reinsurers, the autonomous vehicle software companies, the fleet operators, we all have a role to play in that, which is to make sure that what we bring to market is comprehensive. It's a holistic solution. It's a transportation solution. You mentioned the likely downfall of the private, or at least the significant diminishing in private vehicle insurance. The whole model of the insurance system will change for this technology, and it has to be a holistic approach rather than a kind of piecemeal. Each individual has their own solution, maybe in siloed lines of risk, etc. We're hitting the reset button really, and we will truly be working together to put together solutions that respond and that work. The liability conversations are in terms of who will be responsible in the event of incident. It's such a huge topic, and it's fascinating from a moral and philosophical perspective as well as a technical perspective. So that's probably a topic that we address. Well, you can't address it in one session, but it's the key here is that insurance plays a really critical enabling role in making sure that people can be comfortable that come what may, they don't have to be worried about the technology that they're interacting with, because humans need to trust this technology. It's solving human problems.
And I mean, let's be honest here. There'll be quite a long transition period as well. I mean, we'll be in this hybrid world of human-driven, robot-driven vehicles for a very, very long time. We can all speculate whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever the case may be. But that also means that there is a continued need to, well, improve and evolve retail propositions as well. So maybe Jeroen, to you, what is the retail proposition in this world? Is it only in parallel to shared autonomous vehicles, or is there a retail proposition for perhaps passengers, or is retail selling into the fleet operators of shared autonomous vehicles?
I think that's still to be seen, because partly you have, of course, the liability part. But if you now look at the typical car insurance, you have different aspects of car insurance. One of them is also it's the passengers protection, passengers and goods, so that if something happens to you or someone else in the car, it is insured. And if you have goods with you and you have a crash, it is insured if you choose that coverage. And I don't know if that will be the passenger insurance. I don't know if that will be like a standard feature of taking a trip in self-driving car, or those are the things that are optional that you can take if you want to protect your children or something, that you have additional insurances for those matters. But yeah, that is to be seen. And but most of the things I do think I see a large shift to like more like a business insurance solution.
So Margherita, given the sheer scale of this product liability risk, because of course, if vehicles are not just autonomous, but actually also connected, maybe there's also a, let's say, software update issue, which would then link back to the software provider or the OEM or the integrator, whoever integrates the software. In any case, it's a big product liability proposition. Would it be right to assume that only a few large reinsurers will even have the financial clout to stem this, or will we see a lot of innovation, perhaps also a lot of younger and new and emerging insurance companies to serve this market?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point there. I think the new entrants in this space really will be those insurance companies and reinsurance companies that want to invest in the capabilities to understand these new risks, right? But I would not say that only big reinsurance companies can be the ones that enter this space. In fact, it is rarely the case that only one reinsurance company or one insurance company covers the entire risk of an OEM, right? It's usually the risk is dissected in layers, and then each insurance company or each reinsurance company will enter depending on their appetite. So I would say that the blocker perhaps comes more from the fact of having the capabilities to understand what it is, what kind of risk you're really underwriting and looking at. And it's also true that on the other hand, sometimes smaller startup insurance companies can be more innovative and can be sometimes even faster in developing these new expertise. So I would say that it really depends. I can say that at Swiss Re, we definitely invest a lot of capabilities in trying to scientifically studying these new risks and trying to understand what this risk entails, and also support our clients. So support the insurance industry in general in understanding these new risks.
Here. Thank you. Rebecca, now the Oxbotica business model is such that you partner with fleet operators who then license your software. What liability do you think falls to well, effectively your customers, the fleet operators who, you know, sit somewhere between the manufacturer and the end customer, but surely also take some responsibility at the minimum, but liability, I would think as well?
Yeah, it's a really it's an important question actually, because of course you have the instances where the software itself might be at fault. So you know, to Margherita's conversation around the product's liability, that seems relatively clear. If there's an issue with the software, it's a product liability scenario. What then when you have a fleet operator where, and as we've seen to date, most of the incidents involving autonomous vehicles have been due to manual error. We're obviously at this point contemplating where there's a safety driver. As soon as we extract a safety driver and the slightly more hands-on approach of a fleet operator, we'll have to again revisit this. But when you've got a scenario where a fleet operator is utilizing safety drivers or similar, that brings a really interesting dynamic into the equation, because if it's not the software's fault, but a human safety driver has made some kind of error interacting with the vehicle, yes, absolutely, the fleet operator has some kind of liability to bear. That will depend case by case. I think from it can be boiled down actually into two pillars, really, looking at the how liability will be assessed, at least until it's been crystallized in law. First of all, we all, of course, have the ability to commercially negotiate our what liabilities we take on or waive. That's one piece of the puzzle. A much bigger piece of the puzzle, and where the point about public perception again comes into play, is where in the event that we're unable to proactively manage a claims scenario and keep an incident out of court, which to date has been successful, so all settlements to date have been made out of court, that we will not always be, we as an industry, we as an autonomous vehicle ecosystem will not always be able to keep these events out of court. Highly motivated lawyers will see that eventually something gets in front of a jury, and at that point where the liability falls, it could be argued will lie with a judge and jury, and you have a potential jury panel made up of individuals who could be extremely anti-AI. That they may see an autonomous software solution as only interfering with human operation of vehicles, and therefore predisposed to frankly blaming anyone who had anything to do with the autonomous nature of the vehicle, irrespective of what the actual cause of the error was. So there's a lot of really interesting dynamics here. It's one of the reasons that groups like PAVE are so important, because we do need to start preparing for the eventuality that we as an ecosystem have to deal with one of these scenarios. And the successful failure of this technology and for transforming the world, making it safer, more efficient, more sustainable, is will hinge on how humans perceive it. And that goes to the heart of the liability. There's only so much you can do from the perspective of contractual negotiation and where we think liability ought to lie. As we all know, litigation doesn't work like that. So it's a really interesting question, and the answer is that we probably need to be prepared for everyone being pursued in the event of incident. Make sure that the insurance solution available is a sort of a wraparound all risks scenario, so that whatever happens, we know that cover exists. Further conversation around subrogation and who takes responsibility can remain a commercial negotiation, but fundamentally we need to acknowledge that it will be to an extent out of our hands.
Well, you've really touched upon a lot of things there, and I'm smiling, Rebecca, because I'm recalling my time in the insurance industry where there were these lists of, I guess you would call them sometimes absurd cases of insurance. And I'm sure everyone's nodding here and has seen those lists, who has been held liable for certain crashes, sometimes bewilderingly so by a judge and a jury. And that will be even more interesting when it's not a human who, quote unquote, needs to go into the courtroom to defend itself, I suppose.
Yes,
but you,
Lukas,
go ahead, Jeroen.
Yes. Yeah, and it becomes also more complicated because you have the OEM that makes the car, and they use parts from Oxbotica, and then you probably have a fleet operator. And then what happens if the maintenance of the cars is behind, the tires are worn, and something happens? Everyone's just going to look at each other. So maybe there should be some kind of agreement that a person is always helped, and then afterwards the industry needs to find out who is to blame. But it cannot be that parties are being in lawsuits for 5 years in between them. And what happens if a Google car, for example, hits you? Are you going to sue Google? And how would that work? So that's also an interesting question.
I mean, the Safe Systems road approach really says that there's a collective responsibility for road safety. And in this case, really, it's a question of the partnership that exists between, I suppose, the reinsurer, the primary insurer, the broker, the OEM, the tech or software provider, the fleet operator. Everybody has a certain responsibility. But as ever, there's that sign on somebody's desk that says the buck stops here, which is ultimately who's responsible in that case that we know is going to happen at some point, where a autonomous vehicle will have to be made liable for a crash. Now, I don't have the answer to that, and I'm not sure that we can get to that answer, but there's a very long interim step. And Rebecca, you alluded to it as well. Right now we have safety drivers, and as part of that interim, we're in a time right now where there's quite a few companies recently who have launched teleoperations services. And Jeroen, I know that you will have seen a lot of those because as a technology scout, I'm sure you've seen a few of those. I've had quite a few pitch decks across my desk with teleoperations companies. And in some countries in Europe, it's actually legal for a licensed driver to steer a vehicle remotely. And I have to assume that this makes the teleoperator just as liable in a crash as a regular human driver would be. So maybe, Jeroen, I'll turn to you. How should a teleoperator in this interim time be insured, and who is even able to provide such cover today?
We don't provide such cover today, but I do think it is somewhat similar just to transport companies. So that, but then the driver is not in the car, but outside the car. But those people's jobs is steering cars, in this case from a distance. So I think, and then if something goes wrong, it is the entity that employs them that is to blame. And not necessarily the person, because if you are in a truck and you crash, then it's the truck company who is to blame initially. And I think in this case, the solution should be somewhat similar to that. So those people's job is to steer. Apparently, they can steer up to 5 cars simultaneously. So it's interesting to see, but I would assume the solution will be in that area. So it's so you ensure the whole operations.
Margherita, do you have any thoughts on what this handoff between the retail operator, the product liability insurance, and an operator might look like, and which policy would cover what?
Yes, so I think this is a very interesting topic, the one of what policy covers what. Generally, at least from what we've seen so far, standard commercial auto policies do not really work for autonomous vehicles as in terms of the standard wordings. So usually what we see in this space is really policies that are worded in a very specific way, tailored to cover the risk of autonomous vehicles. And usually the providers themselves are also involved in creating the wording of these policies, so they're very much aware of what's included and what it's not. At the moment, most of the AV providers, at least the ones we see, are also the ones that operate their own testing at this stage. And so they would have one unique policy to cover the various liability risk related to both the technology and the operation. But for the future, when this new technology will be perhaps sold at scale, I think we are looking at, of course, a product liability in combinations with other liability, and it's something that we don't know exactly how it's going to look like. For sure, there needs to be some effort in this space from insurance companies to make sure that we are not strict in the way we look at existing liability policies, in the sense that AVs are completely new animals. And what we have seen so far in existing liabilities and in existing coverages does not fit perfectly to the complexity of the risk that is the one of autonomous vehicles.
Okay. Rebecca, are there any other risks, insurance, maybe moral, ethical, or otherwise, that we're still missing, that we still need to focus on, that might find new products, might find new approaches, or also new partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, this will be an evolving story, really, of exposures manifesting kind of as the deployments to evolve. For me, I suppose that the key to our mind, the key to identifying the risks and making sure that they're addressed either through insurance where available and appropriate, or otherwise, is to take a truly tailored approach, not be wedded to pre-existing silos of risk, identifying the risk as if, as Margherita said, this is a new technology. We're dealing with something that the world has yet to kind of see deployed or had time to assess in full. So it doesn't, we can learn from history. We can take great learnings from what we've seen on a historical basis, but really what we are resetting, rethinking how we view the risks associated with moving goods and people when powered by AI, and making sure that we maintain that flexibility, because the fit for purpose solution today may not be the fit for purpose solution tomorrow, and it will need to continue to evolve as the AI does, always learning, always improving, and our assessment and understanding of the risk will have to mirror that.
Super, thank you. Two more things that I want to talk about. One is cybersecurity, and the other is data. Jeroen, let me turn to you on the cybersecurity piece, because it keeps coming up in pretty much any conversation about connected autonomous vehicles, that there is a potential cybersecurity risk. How do you size this up? What do you think?
I think it's at this moment it's very hard to size it up, unfortunately. But you see, it's more the cars are becoming more and more connected. But I think if you in the future, it will be a completely normal thing to protect your digital belongings and digital assets. Now, if you have a house, you protect it with locks. Your digital belongings it will be protected shortly as well. And I assume for a car, it will be the same. There will be now, as an insurer, you say if it's an expensive car, we have additional demands to protect the car from theft and those things. And I wouldn't be surprised if we state if your car has this amount of technology, we have these demands to protect the technology and the cyber resilience of a car. And partly it will be, as you see now, if car manufacturers are doing over-the-air updates, then it's their responsibility, of course, to have that secure. But it would be a very strange situation if you want to go out of the car and that's your car is hacked. Please pay €100 in order to exit the car. So there should be some things in place to make sure that these risks are they're minimum. And it's not just from insurance aspect that you say, hey, if something happens, we pay. I think there you also will see that the role of an insurer and reinsurer is going to change, because to say they will be active more proactively and state before something happens, these are the demands for prevention and to make sure to avoid risks from happening.
Thank you for that. We talk quite a lot about risk flows, and effectively with that, of course, also comes money flows and a sense of partnership as well. Maybe we'll close on the topic of partnership. But before we get to that, Margherita, you touched upon one more thing earlier in our conversation, and that's data. And perhaps we can just briefly go into the topic of data flows, because right now everybody is, if you will, hoarding the data. I think the OEMs are saying, well, no, it's user data that belongs to the user, but we want some of it. At the very least, of course, the insurer already gets some data, even with basic telematics systems. It's already getting some data, but with fully autonomous vehicles, we'll get quite a lot more. And of course, the software provider will have plenty of data, because the vehicles could be completely and utterly connected, and that data needs to flow through someone. And you could even throw into the mix the connectivity provider, you know, the whoever's running the 5G networks, et cetera, et cetera. So my view on this is always that data is like water. Everyone who touches it gets wet. Everybody has some of the data. Everyone keeps some of the data, but it also needs to be interpreted, but it also needs to be shared between the providers. Margherita, what are your thoughts on this data picture for fully autonomous vehicles?
Yes, so I think it is important that autonomous vehicles providers understand that there is very little that insurance companies can tell without having access to the data that they have, right? And I think it is important that insurance companies and AV providers work very closely together to make sure also that these data are understood correctly, to your point, Lukas. Because yes, the data is good, but understanding what the story that these data are able to tell about the risk is not an obvious task, especially when we talk about the type of data that an autonomous vehicles produce. And this is something that at Swiss Re, and specifically in the Automotive and Mobility Solutions team, we're trying to work towards. And then, of course, there is the whole topic of protecting their own IP, or protecting, if the driver is still there, the privacy of the driver. So we should always be very careful about that as well. But I think the collaboration between the AV providers and the insurance and reinsurance companies really need to be there also for what concerns data sharing.
Seems like a perfect segue. Rebecca, you talked a lot about partnership earlier, and I think ultimately that's what it's going to come down to, is really the partnership that exists between all of the players. So this virtual panel has flown by. We are down to our last few minutes, but I'd like to take this time for each one of you to please share your final thoughts on the topic of insurance in an autonomous world in say 60 seconds or less. So I'll start with you, Rebecca.
So I suppose that the key, always our key messaging is that before we touch on insurance, what are we all doing here? And I mean, collectively, all of us within PAVE and the autonomous vehicle ecosystem in its totality, we are empowering organizations to solve the world's greatest transportation problems. And the world's transportation problems are some of the greatest challenges facing the world today. Everything that we've spoken before about in terms of unacceptable safety record, climate change, broken economics, the congested cities, lack of accessibility. We will be changing the world with this technology, but that is not possible without insurance. Insurance is making our product, it's granting access to the market of our product, it's engendering trust with our end consumers, and it's enabling all of the players within the autonomous vehicle ecosystem to integrate and deploy. So what are we doing? We're changing the world, but insurance is absolutely mission critical to doing so.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I'll go to Jeroen next, and then Margherita, you will have the final word.
It is always good to hear that insurance is an enabler of change rather than an obstructor of change. So we tend to feel the same way. And on the thing that we heard before, just imagine if those cars are going to drive themselves. That also means that today mobility is more or less unplanned and spontaneous. Then it's always it's locked, it's linked to apps and to agendas. So you can plan it. So if you can plan all of mobility, you can do it way smarter than now. And if something happens along the way or there's something slippery, the cars can let each other know. So overall, it will be safer as well. So that will be also very, very fascinating transformation to see how this will happen and who will coordinate all those things. But I think the moment you can start planning all of the mobility, there will be infinite possibilities as well that we don't even know yet now what we can do with the data. And then insurance is just one part of it, but it's good. It's good that it's an essential part, and it's always good that some insurers are more forward-thinking than others. So I leave it at that.
Super, thank you. And finally, Margherita.
Yes, so of course, reiterating what both Becky and Jeroen mentioned about the role of insurance companies as enablers, but I think even one step further, really seeing insurance companies in this space as active players in even mitigating the risk that is related to this technology. And this is something that insurance companies have done historically with other type of risks. And I see very much the role of insurance companies the same in this space, in actively also understanding what this risk is and explaining it to the public, explaining it to regulators, because ultimately insurance companies are the ones that have a monetary incentive in really measuring this risk. And it's probably a very unique position to be in, and I think it's something that we should definitely take advantage of as an insurance industry as a whole.
Thank you, Margherita. The flip side of risk is always return, and the return of what we are working on is, as you have so very, very wonderfully and elegantly said, a better really world that we are working towards with greater quality of life in city, greater safety, and so many other benefits. But again, it is a partnership. And with that, I do want to bang the drum a little bit for the Partnership for Automated Vehicle Education, which is PAVE and PAVE Europe. And on behalf of PAVE Europe, please do hit subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube, and follow us on all of the social media channels, LinkedIn and Twitter, etc. And a big thank you to Margherita, to Rebecca, and to Jeroen for joining us on this PAVE Europe virtual panel. Thanks a lot to you, and thanks a lot to all of you who've joined us today or on YouTube. Take care and drive safely.